So speaking of what's going on in the world with energy, Canada, the U.S., we had a pipeline going. We got past the protesters. You guys, like, all moving forward, and now that's all seems to be on the rocks. What's going on with the pipeline?
Yeah, so KXL actually just got canceled. So that was when President Biden was sworn in. That was his first order of business, was to remove the XO from Trump to axe the KXL, the Keystone XL pipeline that was actually running south out of Alberta down in Saskatchewan into the States, and it was actually under construction. They had several hundred kilometers of this pipeline already laid in the ground, and that immediately put 1,000 workers out of work in Alberta. I'm not sure where your guys' numbers are south of the border, but it put quite a few American workers out of a job there too, and that was pretty troubling. I guess considering the fact that the Alberta government had invested $1.5 billion into this pipeline construction at that point in time. And it's Biden had stated in his election platform that if he were elected, he was going to cancel it, kind of thing. So I don't think there was a lot of people that were, very surprised by what happened. But I think there was a lot of people, well, maybe not a lot of people, that were surprised about the lack of pushback that came from our federal government in Ottawa. We just seem to have a very, very anti-pipeline, pro-green movement, government in power in Canada here right now. That's really been inflicting a lot of pain on our energy industry in the last little while, as far as fossil fuels go. So oil and gas, right? And it's concerning. It's really concerning.
What are Canadians telling themselves about why this happened? I mean, it's one thing to be like, well, President Biden wanted to cancel it, but he has to have push or pressure behind him to do it. So what's the story?
And that's where the web starts getting pretty deep or whatever. But I mean, we don't do ourselves any favors in Canada because we are at a point where we're not really energy sufficient, right? Or we don't look after ourselves by staying within the borders of Canada. It was one of the videos that I did called Energy East, kind of this summer there, where we're our crude oil comes from Alberta here in Canada. We're also one of the second largest oil producers in Canada here in Saskatchewan. And what we do right now is mostly what you see on the eastern coast of Canada is Eastern Canada actually imports oil from, Saudi, Russia, Venezuela, US, instead of keeping Canadian oil flowing across Canada. Or we had, it's called the Energy East Pipeline. This is back in 2017, I believe it was, when it got axed, but it was a plan from TC Energy. With a pipeline, it was only 1,500 kilometers of additional pipeline that needed to be built on top of existing infrastructure, which would have taken oil from Hardisty, Alberta, all the way to the refineries in St. John's, New Brunswick. Alberta crude requires a little bit of special attention to be able to refine, and we actually don't supply enough of it to Eastern Canada. And what wound up happening is TC Energy got kiboshed after our fearless leader Justin Trudeau took over power in Canada here. And what we've done lately is in the wave of the pandemic that's been going on, we actually wound up having to issue a whole bunch of special permits for it. But we actually shipped several loads of crude from the oil sands in Alberta, which actually wound up having to come backwards down up to the existing Trans Mountain pipeline into the coast of BC, and then we're shipping it on tankers via the Panama Canal.
Oh my God!
Around up through the Gulf of Mexico to a refinery in New Brunswick.
That sounds definitely greener. That definitely sounds like a.
Because oil tankers run on hopes and dreams. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's what they run on. So it's a little bit frustrating, the fact that KXL was designed, because the oil that's going down into the States is going to go into the States no matter what. It's just the fact that now, since KXL has been axed, it's going to go back onto trains, and it's going to continue to go down to the States, because we're kind of gridlocked in Canada. And like, the only direction for our oil to flow freely right now is down into the US. and you guys are in a great spot because we're kind of energy locked. You get our oil for pennies on the dollar. And what's happening now is instead of just going through the KXL, which is actually scheduled to be carbon neutral as soon as it came online in 2023, and they actually had plans by 2030 of the KXL compressor stations, pump stations being powered by renewable resources by 2030. So this is basically going to be a zero emissions pipeline that was being created. And we've axed that now, and we're gonna see it all loaded on the train cars again and start running down the states on trains on tracks.
So I've seen you wearing your tinfoil hat in your shows. What's your tinfoil hat story about why this is? Because it doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah, it's pretty upsetting, and I guess I don't want to get too far into the tinfoil hat stuff with what's going on, but I mean it's just the fact that if you follow the money on who owns tankers, on what gets shipped off of the west coast of Canada, who owns stocks and rail companies on which the oil is shipped down into the States. And if you look into a lot of these things, I mean, I'll let people look into whatever they want to kind of thing. But if you look, it's called the Yellowstone to Yukon movement and a few other things where you see environmental groups that are actually against pipelines for environmental reasons. If you look into, there's a lovely, lovely lady in BC named Vance Crowe, who is actually very good at following funding on different environmental groups. They are funded by some people that have very, very deep interests in oil from Canada not going to foreign markets on our coastlines, but rather being run down to the States at a discounted rate. So her name is Vance Crowe. Fair questions. She's a great follow on Twitter if you're on Twitter, but there's been some pretty crazy things exposed as far as the Rockefeller brothers and Tidewater and a few different things.
Like the things that you're saying here, like I know firsthand that is no shit. Like I have a friend that his wife, she works for land trusts. And basically that is put money and we're going to say that it's buying these land trusts, but we're actually going to use this for an environmental war chest that is essentially an arm of the Democratic Party. And it is to the tune of like hundreds of millions of dollars, of which are always like by the time that money hits the streets, it's going to fund that bus to get a bunch of people to show up at a pipeline. That is like, this is not conspiracy. I know this is going on.
It's straight up, and that's kind of why I don't get too far into it, because I mean, this is straight goods, and it's actually kind of scary is as far as I'm concerned, considering the fact that when you see a lot of the protesters that we see on a lot of these, even with the Coastal GasLink pipeline, a lot of the protesters that were there rallying support, standing in solidarity with the Wet'suwet'en to shut down the Coastal GasLink pipeline, which actually takes natural gas from Groundbirch, BC out into Kitimat to be liquefied and shipped off to Asia to actually help combat climate change by replacing coal-fired generators with liquid natural gas for way less emissions, therefore reducing global greenhouse gas emissions. These groups are not associated whatsoever with the Wet'suwet'en tribes, and most of the indigenous people that you actually engage with that have the opportunity to be involved with a lot of these pipelines that are set to go through their communities support them because they actually have economical upticks in what happens with them. They get jobs, they get revenue off the pipelines. A lot of these indigenous people support what's happening and have nothing to do with the protesters that are protesting against it. And there was a great video that came out of Ontario with some people that were blocking off intersections in Ontario, which has absolutely nothing to do with the Coastal GasLink pipeline. Being asked, so like, why are you so against this pipeline? What's in the pipeline? Well, it's oil going through the pipeline is what they would tell you. It's not oil going through the pipeline. It's natural gas, right? It's a group of people that are completely out of touch with what's going on, that are paid to be there to keep us from getting our resources to the coast. And we're really heading down a track where we're going to find ourselves in a situation where we're in energy poverty for the simple fact that we're not doing what we should be with our own natural resources.
And people think that that's hyperbole, right? But there have been no shortage of countries in the past where they grew plenty of food, but then through their trade policies, through bad decisions, through government like interference, those people starved to death.
Yeah, and that's terrifying. And like I would bring to everyone's attention right now is Enbridge Line 5, which is another thing that's happening here right now, which is scheduled for May 1st, which actually runs through the Straits of Lake Michigan. It's scheduled to be shut off effective May 1st is what's happening right now. I believe Enbridge is working legally to keep this from happening. But right now, we ship crude from Western Canada down through the States through Line 5 to get around to Quebec and Ontario, which logistically, as the crow flies, it's shorter to go that way than it is through Canada. But there we are again with a foreign nation that has the interest of fuels of what Ontario and Quebec are supposed to be receiving within their grasp and control. That's a pretty dangerous situation to put your country in, as far as I'm concerned. And that would have been solved with Energy East, with 1,500 kilometers of pipeline that was planned and ready to go, that actually got shut down by the very provinces that are supplied by Line 5 right now. So I don't want to see it, but I feel like there's a very dangerous day of reckoning coming where we're going to see very, very high fuel prices in Eastern Canada, Ontario, Quebec specifically. And the only way that's going to be combated is to bring more tankers in from places like, the Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and different places. And we continue to put ourselves dependent upon other countries' natural resources, on top of which we sit in the top 4 in the world, which I just, if you ever ran a farm like we run our country, you would not be farming for very long.
Oh yeah, man. I just heard our new Treasury Secretary that was quoted as saying, the way that we're going to get the budget back on track is that we're going to print and spend more money until we can get healthy, and then we'll get that. And it's like, no one else gets to operate like this. No one else gets to say gravity doesn't exist. I'm just going to fly to the moon. Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.